I'm Corey Webster. This is my project for INLS 697. Today I'm going to talk to you about Woot.com and the community behind it. So first off, what is Woot? This is the mission statement that they include. Woot is a lifestyle. Woot is a vision. Woot is a pungent aroma that never apologizes for what it is. Woot is the hope in the eyes of a child when that child realizes that you don't have to pay list price for cool stuff. Basically, what the administrators are saying here is that Woot is a ever-changing website that showcases special deals on a variety of products for purchased wholesale or refurbished and then sold directly to their online customers. So through these purchases, the customers get a huge discount, and that way they don't have to pay full price. It began with a single primary www.woot.com website and has now grown into several sub-woots of shirt.woo, wine, tech, home, sport, and deals. Each of these pages gets updated daily at midnight, and products are only sold until they're sold out. With such dynamic content, it's necessary that Woot provide an engaging and interactive website. And the content of their web pages has grown and evolved just as the capital behind the website has grown. So today the site has grown not only from the addition of subpages but also in coding quality. Each subpage is dynamic and includes complex information about the real-time products around the world. So let's just go ahead and break down one of the websites. This is tech.woot. As you can see, it's a technical product. It showcases the price and a few other features. The write-up, that's every Woot since the site was created has a major theme behind it, which is kind of a sardonic sense of humor. Rather than just selling you a product, Woot goes a step further by writing a poignant, personalized description for each device and item. For example, this is a sound system, and they tell you there's going to be a showdown between you and your crotchety old neighbors. So use this if you have some remarkable boon of fortune. Don't use this if your neighbors score above 8 in the universal crotchety index. Just some little jokes, some puns that add something additional to each product. They also work in comments from their users. This one from the Guru guy, which is just a way for customers to get a member perspective and not just have to take the technical details, even not just taking the stories behind products, but also getting a personalized, real human interaction with the products. And for more classical customers who aren't interested in the comedy of the site, they also include a features page, which breaks down the in-depth information about the product, the size, the weight, amperage, what it's compatible with, as well as detailed specifications. By employing some Google Analytics, the site also provides users with information about the speed to the first purchase, infographics about how many Woots were performed by state, hour, and purchase quantity, as well as the seniority of Wooters buying the product. While some might see this abundance of finely tuned information as arbitrary and cumbersome, Woot effectively wrangles the data as a means of persuading wary customers. Basically saying no one wants to be the only person buying something, but they may be interested in being the first or the only one from their state or the most senior Wooter. They also include comments pages, again, just listing information as mentioned by other Wooters, things that they thought of that particular product, and if or not, they'd recommend it. That way they add a personal touch, and customers benefit from personal stories or horror stories, and then they can make a more educated purchase. So here's an example of a comments page, and with that, it allows for customers to get some trust building from the site. So you can see how long a person's been on the site, That 940 is their quality of post, which is ascertained by the administrators saying if or not a post was of quality, as well as if or not users have upvoted that particular quote. Additional information you can get about each user is the number of woots, the number of items that they purchased from the site, the number of times they posted, when they joined, and their rep, which is just basically the quality of their posts per 100 posts. But where does this matter? What is the point of this user information? For example, say we wanted to purchase a shirt, this wishful thinking shirt, and we wanted to see a little bit about who made the shirt. In this case, by clicking on Pixel Pants, we can see the artist's name and all the shirts related to them and browse through their themes and styles and make more purchases, or say I'm going to start following this particular user and see what more information they provide because I think they give a certain quality of posts. This is also applicable to the community source deals. So this is where anyone can post information, any deal, any discount or coupon they saw on the internet. And so if we notice that a certain person, a certain username has posted things related to something that we use. For example, I tend to get accessories from the similar type of user because that's someone else who was probably looking for that. So we can list by user the number of products they've had, the number of, as you see to the left, the quality of their posts, and how many people thought that this was a good post. If you look to the middle, that 101, that tells you when a deal is dead, and you can no longer get that deal from that. You can no longer get that deal from that specified website. So overall, I think Woot is a great website. It's a great use of multimedia and information in order to take something that's pretty mundane as purchasing online products and turning it into a complete user experience, something that people look forward to, something that people want to do every single day. But don't take my word for it. Let's see what some of the scholars have to say about this. In the future, according to Google's Larry Page, he basically describes what he thinks will be the future of digital and other technologies, the things that he thinks will have a major impact in the future. One of the things that he specifically talks about are self-driving cars. In the article it says, "There's still a small project within Google that many outsiders, including investors, think of as little more than a flashy, fanciful science experiment, but to Page and the writer, it's a serious endeavor with commercial opportunities." What this made me think of is the way that social media was originally thought of, basically evolving from email and into like AIM and Instant Messenger, and then into, of course, MySpace and Facebook. They were thought of as little interesting ways for kids to come out and explain about themselves and interact with one another, but it was never really thought of that, soon Facebook would be a multi-million-dollar company worth 500 million and so on and so forth. So those same arguments are being used again. I think that self-driving cars have a major potential and could be like the biggest thing that comes out of technology today. And one important point they say is like Americans spend on average 250 hours a year commuting. If the car does the driving, that's time that can be spent working, or more realistically, that's time that will be spent doing other things, including social media. And from counterculture to cyberculture, they talk about how the 60s and the counterculture revolution basically translates into a lot of the things that we're seeing today. One of the big points is that science fiction is one of the most underrated influences on our culture, and on science itself. It's easy to see that because a lot of what motivates our scientists are things that people fantasize, people theorize about in their science fiction novels, flying cars, conveyor belts, different things that become a kind of an impetus to make creation happens. What I thought was the idea behind the whole Earth catalog as well as the well is customers creating content and the value. Basically, this is, and that's something that was slowly being realized out of social networking, and it came out of cheapness from them rather than having to have a team of authors and researchers going out into the field and creating stories. Why not give that right to the users, and then they create their own content and then they read it themselves. Therefore, you don't have to contribute much, but they'll still find value in it. And of course, this is obvious in things like Wikipedia, Urban Dictionary, places that are completely crowdsourced, but are of huge value to the community outside of that. Nancy Bam in Communities, Relationships, and Industries has a lot of good points about social communication and online communication. She says, "We are a group who watch and do things together. We share experiences, understandings, history, knowledge, and as such become a community with exclusions, inside jokes, and camaraderie." This is something that's especially true with the Woo community. Again, they create their own language. We create our own inside jokes that lots of people who aren't a part of that particular community may not understand, and it's intentionally alienating so that people have to come back to Woot every day and have to spend a lot of time doing it in order to become inside of that camaraderie. It's the same thing with Reddit, the same thing with a lot of other networks, that if you don't understand it, you can't really take full advantage of it. She also says that social media is a disruptive moment. What she means by that is it's like an earthquake in a library and all the books falling off the shelves. You can either put the books back up onto the shelves, or you can make change and new ways of doing things. Social media is basically, as a communication medium, we can either just do the same things that we've always done, using it as a way to just talk to one or two people at the same time, or we can do other things with it. Like now we can have Skypes of different community leaders from different countries and different things like that. We can share things in an instant as soon as we upload it to millions of people. Lots of things that other technologies before it didn't have the potential to, but who knows what will come out of that from social media. And she also says technologies don't undermine relational outcomes, but they become important parts of how these relationships are made. What she means by that is that technologies don't define exactly how people can communicate, but they become a part of what is thought of that relationship. If you only know someone from Facebook, then you're going to have a different type of communication than you are with people that you've met physically, your close-knit friend groups. Barry Wellman in Networked Individualism brings up a lot of good points. One of which, his law of media conservation, the golden rule. If you email me, I'll email you back. If you phone me, I'll phone you back. This comes into play with Woot, with that community specifically, because if you comment on someone's, if on their post or on their T-shirt, oftentimes they'll look into your posts and things that you've done, and in such kind of become closer to one another. Whatever form your help takes, even if it's like an upvote, they'll likely respond with an upvote either to your comment or to other posts of yours, and maybe become a follower of yours. And one of the biggest, most valid points, the world is composed more of consumers than producers of information. What that means is for every one poster, there are thousands of people who are lurkers. So I thought this was pretty obvious. This is true of all social networks because when it comes to media and information, there are always going to be people at that cutting edge, people at the source that have more access to it than the general population. So there are always going to be people that are more connected, that have more friends, and that when they share things, more people see it. And there'll be millions of people who get to see it. Not everybody has that access to produce their own information. I think that transitions well into Duncan Watts in his 6 Degrees discussion, where he talks about hubs, a few websites having thousands of links. Most have a few people have thousands of connections. Most only stay within their community. I thought that was something that was very important, very true, because obviously it seems to be that lots of people, everyone knows someone who has moved away. Everyone knows someone who goes to another community, and therefore that spreads the community that they interact with. He says that networks evolve according to a pattern. This was something that he also linked to diseases, typhoid Mary and patient zero. What this describes is if you have a social network, if you have a network of friends, as soon as someone moves out of that network, you have thus expanded your network. But more specifically, that's one point over there. They'll create a new network, and then that'll just keep happening all over until eventually everyone is 6 degrees away from one another. Robin Dunbar talks about his Dunbar number, 150. Biggest things I took out of that related to Woot is the digital revolution is going to cut through constraints that limit our social world simply because of time and access. As it pertains to social media, post sales and reviews are international. Internet deals tend to be valid all over. Something that brick and mortar stores can't offer. You can't stay open 24 hours, 7 days a week, the way that the internet is always open. Digital means help us keep in touch when separated, but in the end, we still have to get together to do stuff face to face. One thing that made me think of is how I interact with other people that I know are a part of the Woot community. One of the biggest ways that I see that happening is through shirts. If I ever see somebody wearing a shirt that I know was posted to shirt.woot, I can immediately say that person's a Wooter. We, in one way or another, interact, and we therefore have a certain connection, even though there are hundreds of thousands of people that do that same thing, but still in a world of strangers it just feels like one more significant connection. And everything is obvious. Duncan Watts continues saying that people don't spend their time being rational. They learn through repetition because it's too much work to think rationally all the time. What that means is that the idea is people think that every time we interact with a problem, we always rationally go through it. We pick out our points. We go through the scientific method, and that's how we decide what to do. But in reality, we are often just acting out of repetition. And then as soon as something changes in that, we also have to change with it, or it affects us in one way or another. He also describes the halo effect, where companies that are doing well are thought to have had better management, better strategies, better processes, even though often the opposite of true. This is something that we see for Woot because there are hundreds of daily deal websites that do the same thing, and Woot adding that comedy, that community to it, that could have worked to their disfavor just as easily, but they have been successful. They have been able to get corporate sponsorship. Now they're owned by Amazon, and it makes it seem like they were better at everything, but in reality, they just offered something. They took a shot in the dark, and they hit the target. Racial marketing is something that Watts talks about, where ethnocentric commercials are used to market to perceived audiences. Woot uses this as what I'd like to call community marketing. They sell new things to the same audiences, knowing what they like and what they like to hear. Which brings us to who their perceived audience is. I think of their audience as the father from Modern Family. Basically, it's a tech-savvy 22 to 40-year-old male with a dry sense of humor, who gets jokes about the 80s, who has an abundance of free time, and he's middle to upper class. There is a necessity for disposable income because most of the products on Woot aren't things that you need to keep your house going. You're never going to find bricks or anything that someone specifically has to have. It's always just kind of gadgets, people who are gadget hungry, people who are kind of impulsive with their purchases, and that's who Woot sells to, and that they've made a killing off of that demographic. For Pew Internet Studies, I looked at the trends in online shopping, a survey they conducted in 2007. One of the most important things that I took out of this was that Americans are increasing the amount of time they spend looking online for information on products, on consumables, retail items. And more specifically, the amount of people that use the internet for that purpose, as we see in the second graph, the percentage of American adults who've ever bought a product online is increasing. By now, I'm sure that has grown, again, according to that curve, and is still increasing. And what I really get out of this is that that community that I just mentioned, the upper middle class, is definitely in full effect on the online purchasing front, because when we look at how many use the internet for online banking, for online commerce in general, that number is a lot higher for people who make more money. So people who have that free time that I mentioned, that disposable income, they spend time doing more things online, especially banking, than other demographics. Talking about Albert Barabasi's bursts, he describes burstness, the idea that human events occur in bursts, millions of people doing same things at the same time. Obviously, this occurs with things like breakfast and commute to work. The same with online posting. If you notice, if you pay attention enough to Facebook, when you are going to bed at night and when you wake up in the morning, a lot of people are waking up at the same time, so you'll get more likes, more posts at certain hours than other hours. He also says if you know a human's positions, or their past positions, within a 93% probability, you can predict their future positions. So if you can predict what things I'm going to buy, or what things I have, if you see what things I have bought, you can see what I'm probably going to buy. This is what happens with Woot all the time. A lot of times you'll see things that they sell. One time they even sold a jetpack just because, just to see what interest would be on that product. It was several $100,000, but you know, if you can see what people think about that, what the community says about it, you still get to say like what types of things they'll be interested in the future, and what types of things you can market to them. Dana Boyd speaks about privacy challenges for big data in this information era. One thing she says is that privacy isn't equal to security. When people feel they have trust in a system and how that system is architected, they're more comfortable in negotiating privacy there. Woot does a good job of this because they make all of the users feel like they're part of the community. They survey the customers all the time. They give special deals to people that have been Wooters for a long time. I know I recently just got a coupon for $25 for Woot, just because I've been with Woot for a certain amount of time. Another thing, again, I mentioned encoding. The most prominent way that
young people achieve privacy in a social environment is through encoding, having material that is publicly accessible, but for which the meaning is not. This is not. Roger Dingledine talked about Tor, which is an internet service that stops internet service from knowing where you are and where they are sending information. What he talks about with this is anonymity loves company, and you have to let people decide how much of their data they want being accessible. At Woot, the default is none of your information is visible. All they can see is your made-up username, not even your email address, and how many things you've bought with Woot. If you give up that information, that's up to you, but by default, you don't have to. And the main battle that he talks about is with China and dictatorships that want to censor the internet, but the counter argument he offers is that Australia, Denmark, and other European countries also employ censorship. And he says if we can't fix those countries, how are we going to fix countries like China? It makes sense to me, the battle that he has with censorship, because we feel that the rights that we enjoy as Americans are things that other people should get to enjoy. And this argument also is present in Woot and other things that people do, not necessarily malicious sites. Again, they talked about when China blocked Google and how many people used Tor as a result for that. So things that people do, everyday things, are also affected by censorship. Julian Assange was the main subject of the Wiki Rebels, WikiLeaks piece that we looked up. He talks about hackers and how it's much easier to attack something than to defend it. This is the battle that's been going on since the internet came about. There have always been people trying to either expose things that are malicious or just take advantage of the system. Things that are available online, trying to spread that or just do general damage on the internet. One quote that is mentioned: the liberation of the human mind from religion, property, and government. Those are the three things that have driven humanity since the first man that became an inventor, since Enlightenment. Hassan Elahi talks about giving the FBI what it wants. His battle with the FBI after being detained for accused of terrorist attacks. By putting everything about me out there, I am simultaneously telling everything and nothing about my life. This is something that happens daily with social networks. When Elahi began his process, there wasn't really a medium that so necessitated this act. But again, now this is what we do all the time. We show what we're eating. We show where we've been. We even log our location so people can know where we physically are. And Hassan, his fight, he said, if you want me, fine, but I can watch myself better than you can, and I can give a level of detail that you will never have. Kirby Ferguson in Everything is a Remix talks about loss aversion, the fact that we place a much higher value on losses than gains, that we're more driven to avoid losing things than we are to gain new products. This applies especially to auctions and things of that selling nature, which Woot doesn't quite incorporate, but obviously you can understand how that works together. He also says that we can't produce anything new until we are fluent in the language of our domain. This again relates to shirt.woot, because many of the shirts tell stories that have been retold, reimagined, complex equations that people are familiar with, and changing perspective on nostalgic themes. Nothing new is seemingly created, but it is something new because of the fact that it is changed, transformed, mixed, and matched. Lotta Demick talks about memes and how people relate to one another with the memes and how those memes are propagated through social networking. Weak ties are more likely to expose people to new information than strong ties, which makes sense. She says that 90% of all of everyone's ties are weak ties because obviously those are strong ties are people who we spend a lot of time getting to know, learning a lot of information about. We can't mentally do that with every single person. So more of the people that we interact with, cashiers, other people, are going to be weak ties than are going to ever be strong ties. We're more likely to share something from friends that we're not as close to because we don't believe that our friends are going to have access to that same information if they are a weak tie for us. Versus if it's a strong tie, if you post the same thing that your best friend said, most people that are either of your friends are likely to see that again, and you probably won't get the same response as you would if you brought new information from someone who you knew sparingly. The biggest thing, one thing that we talked about in class is the idea of bonding social capital, using this socialization to bring strong ties together. Where bonding is strong, you don't get much novelty, you get uniformity. So if all people talk to is their own group, then eventually they all start to be kind of similar. Their humor is the same, the things that they enjoy tend to yield to one another. Which brings me to the book that I did my report on, Cory Doctorow and Charles Strauss, Rapture of the Nerds. One of the big points that he mentions, there's always someone who unaccountably carries the let's lick the frozen fence post gene. There's always a geek who'll do it because it's a historical, technical imperative. What this means to everyone is that technology is a self-hating field. Every time someone invents something, the invention that preceded it becomes obsolete. Once we have the phonograph, we're already thinking about TV. Once we get TV, we want HD. And then, of course, we must have 3D to follow. They know that people are going to keep pushing the boundaries, keep trying to lick that pole, and Woot basically keeps those pole lickers supplied with a captive audience. These things like, for instance, I bought a remote control device that I can attach to my iPod so I can control my TV. Obviously, I already have a television control, but why not have a novelty item that I can attach to my iPod? It's not always things that are needed. It's more often things that are just novelty items. But again, there's always a market for it, and Woot basically capitalizes on that market. The novel often makes puns and jokes to a sci-fi Trekkie audience. The main character, who is has an attempted execution by religious zealots in South Carolina, and they use the most vicious post-apocalyptic nuclear fallout creature, ants. The sentence is, they're everywhere. If they could speak, their message would be, you will be assimilated. This is a reference to the Borg in Star Trek, and basically saying this is a joke that they're making directly to who they think their audience is. And if you don't get that, then it just kind of goes over your head. And how that relates to Woot is obviously it's that Trekkie science fiction audience that they're marketing to. What the primary argument of the novel is the collective disappointment and the underutilization of the limitless resource that is the internet. Ho, after he becomes a female, her primary beef against the singularity has never been existential, it's aesthetic. The power to be a being of pure thought, the unlimited, unconstrained world of imagination, and we build a world of animated GIFs and stupid sight gags, other stupid things that we do with the power of the internet. The cloud is imagined in the book environment as somewhere where one can upload their entire personality. They can have millions of different iterations of themselves, and it's still used the same way for Facebook, for social networking. While this has, infinite possibilities, we can solve so many problems. What we end up spending most of our time doing is Redditing, buying products that we don't need, accessing things 24/7 on the internet that it's not necessarily benefiting humankind in any way. And that's the collective disappointment that Charles Strauss and Cory Doctorow seem to have. Which brings us to the argument between Clay Shirky and Nick Carr. Shirky believing in the cognitive surplus, the ability of the world's population to volunteer and contribute, collaborate on shared, sometimes global products. Him noticing Wikipedia and Ushahidi, these things that only come out of social networking and wouldn't be possible otherwise. He says there's a spectrum between doing mediocre work and doing good work. There's a gap between doing nothing and doing anything. So basically, even when we waste our time when we're alone browsing through other people's Facebooks or getting on Reddit and just looking for funny pictures of cats, we're still doing something. There's still something being contributed, even if it's not technically riveting or something that is so brilliant. It's still something that is being contributed to humanity. Nick Carr in The Shallow says that there's a distinction for thinking between exploration, which is skimming and scanning for something to read, and reading deeply. The web encourages us to be in a constant state of browsing. So rather than thinking thoughtfully about things we read, as he says happens when you're alone, when you have time to isolate yourself and just go into a world with stuff that you're encountering. The internet is just us distinguishing between links and whether or not to click them all the time. And as such, we don't get anything deep, anything truly of mental value out of it, because we never get to go beyond that state of skimming and scanning. So overall, I think Woot is a important and popular community for what it contributes, what it does for its members, and for how it relates to the things that we've discussed in the class. I hope this has been informative, and I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.